Hello friends, it's Nancy from Astrology and Angel Mediums today with another video talking about some of the decks that I love. And today I wanted to focus on decks that I love because of the artwork. But these aren't decks that are in my current use rotation or that I really reach for quite often, like some of my other decks. And some of these, I have like a sentimental attachment to them because I've had them for so long. And I don't know if you've even heard of some of these. Some of these are independently printed decks. And I'm just going to kind of show you guys some of the artwork and then also kind of talk about why these aren't decks that I'm currently actively using or why I'm not currently actively using them. So the very first one I want to talk about is going to be the Duality deck by Tanya Bond. And this is an independently printed deck that I purchased quite a few years ago. I don't remember, 2015 is when I purchased this. It was one of the first kind of like independent decks that I got. I think I got it on Etsy because the artwork is just so beautiful. And I'm going to show you guys the cards. And so there is this large kind of booklet that comes with it that has some really interesting perspectives to the cards and things like that. And I think that there was this part of me that was like, oh, I'm going to use this deck all the time. It's so pretty, blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of got a little bit, I don't want to say frustrated, but maybe I felt very challenged by how to read this deck in a way that was of benefit to those that were purchasing readings from me at the time. So, and here's some of the cards. They're absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous artwork. And again, I think some of the card meanings are nice to kind of utilize in a reading. I may actually dust this off and start using it again. I do really enjoy the aspects that are kind of included in this deck and things to kind of keep in mind. And this artwork is stunning. I mean, I love all the details. I love all of it. This almost reminds me of like a strength card. And if you study tarot, you'll kind of see similar themes from a tarot deck. The others. I'll just show you guys all of the cards and then I'll kind of talk about why. This reminds me of like Lilu from Fifth Element. And sorry if you see smoke. I have some incense going right now. But it is a beautiful, beautiful deck in a lot of different ways. I do really enjoy the artwork. But again, it's not a deck that I am constantly kind of like reaching for at the current moment. And I just can't let it go. I've had it. I don't know if it's like a sentimental thing because I've had it for almost 10 years. And it was, again, one of the first kind of like independently published decks that I had purchased directly from the artist. And so I kind of felt like, I don't know, like I was doing something. I will say that when I first started my practice, a lot of my decks were mass produced. So they're going to be decks that I would have been able to easily access at like a Barnes and Noble or Books A Million or I can't even think of some of the other bookstores that were like the bigger borders. What was it? Like Half Price Books, things like that, where they would have different decks that you could easily access and purchase. So a lot of the decks that, especially for Oracle decks, my introduction to them was through Hay House decks. And so I did have quite a few decks from like John Holland and Doreen Virtue. And I'm trying to think of who else was like really big at the time that I was like, oh, I really love these sort of decks. So a lot of the decks that I did have were like that kind of traditionally more mass-produced sort of deck. And as I was kind of getting a little bit more into utilizing different decks and trying to find different things, I started to kind of branch out and get more independently published decks. Now, these two are from the same artist and same creator, which is Stacey DeMarco, and they're both illustrated by Jimmy Manton, which if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll see why I have probably held on to these. I love Jimmy Manton's artwork. I just think it's really, I don't know, it reminds me of like comic book, but like very like strong and powerful. And I like the decks that Stacey DeMarco has put out. So these were actually published, I think, from Blue Angel. It's been a while since I've looked at these. Let's see. So this is Beyond Words, and this one's Blue Angel. So I don't know if this is the same publishing house that maybe has kind of changed. I bought these at different time periods in my life. As I could find them, I would pick them up. So this is a deck from 2012. And then this deck, I'm not even seeing when this was published. So let's look in the inside of the guidebook. Has the IBSN information. So this one says in 2013, 2011 and 2013. So, and this is originally published from Blue Angel Publishing. So it looks like this is another place, because from my understanding, Blue Angel was more in Australia, kind of like Rockpool Publishing has a lot of, I think the publishing house is in Australia. So at the time, I don't think that there was a lot of that cross over into the US market. So this deck is really cool because if you like decks from Alana Fairchild, it's going to be very much a similar sort of energy with like how much information comes from the deck or from each of the cards. There's like some invocations or prayers or spells or whatever you want to call them to kind of work with each of these gods and titans. And I don't know, I'm sure many people that are into this stuff were probably into Greek mythology or Egyptian, stories and things of that nature. So I think maybe that's why I love decks like this, because it's like my inner child was like, oh, I love like being able to utilize these different energies and kind of call on them and kind of reflect back on like what I've learned. So I'm just going to show you the cards because I love the artwork. So there's a little bit of all different cultural gods, which I do love as well. And you may recognize some of these, but the artwork is just so stunning to me. And I love that it wasn't just one pantheon of gods, that it's different ones from different cultures, different time periods. And there's this like strength to all of the cards in the artwork that I just really thought was beautiful, and why I decided to always keep this, even if it's not a deck that I reach for all of the time. There's Zeus with his eagle. So I just loved the energy of these cards so much, and I would use them quite often in my own kind of like finding the divine balance between the masculine and the feminine energies within myself. So, and I do love that there's a little bit of this like, kind of connection that we can make with each of those gods and what they kind of rule over. So here's like Shiva, the destroyer. We have Mithras, which is sacrifice, perfection, cycles, because Helios was the one that was, carrying the sun across the horizon. And then we have Dionysus. I just love how the artwork looks. I just thought it was such a beautiful deck that had such interesting energy to it. There's Loki, Eros, Odin, Anubis, Lu. So yeah, there's a lot of different energies to it. And I do love that it's not overly dark with the artwork, which I have noticed a lot with like very masculine decks. They try to make them a little too dark. And the reason why I had gotten this one was because I first had purchased the Goddesses and Sirens deck, which I was like, oh my God, I love this artwork. And he also illustrated a couple other decks from Stacey DeMarco, such as like the Gospel of Aradia, and then also the Halloween Oracle, I believe, that I'm for certain are decks that he's done. As I said, that's why I got this deck, was because of this deck, because I just loved the cards and the, oh, this one goes over here. See, it's been a while since I've even opened these decks. So I was like, I don't even know why this one's over there. I'm going to have to see why it got mixed up over there. Or maybe there was a sample card. I think I remember this one saying it had a sample card. Yeah. So here is, again, similar artwork. It's going to be feminine leaning. And so same thing with the actual card messages. I do love that there is the inclusion of actual pictures in this deck. So we have the different goddesses. There's, again, kind of information and how to connect to those. There's invocations. There's going to be their symbols, kind of what they rule over, a little bit about their stories, which I do really love as someone that grew up really loving, Greek mythology and Roman mythology and, the gods and goddesses and, things of that nature. I have always found it so fascinating. Same thing with like Egyptian stories, or learning more about like the Hindu pantheon and things like that. I mean, it's just so beautiful to kind of learn about all these different cultures. So, and I think that this deck is a wonderful one if you're wanting to learn a little bit more about different cultures in a way that doesn't feel like you're, being culturally insensitive. And there's Gaia. Again, very similar artwork that is going to look very fearful, like not fearful, very like fearsome, I guess, like very like, oh, they just look so powerful. And I just loved, because a lot of like feminine decks that I had at the time were just like showing them in very like soft, welcoming kind of poses, very beautiful. Like there wasn't a lot of this like, what is their power? And I live for this kind of energy of like, look, they're beautiful, but they can also be very powerful. That's probably the most beautiful Sheila Nagig card I've ever seen. There's the Muses. And Katesh. Freya, which that's a beautiful... If you like comic books, I think that you would enjoy this deck. White Buffalo Woman. Lakshmi. Joan of Arc. Morgan Le Fay. Baba Yaga, which is not so like creepy. Persephone. Andromache. And then Hera, which it was like, that's such a beautiful depiction of Hera. The Valkyries. And then Nuit. Athena with her owl. And Hecate, which I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. I might have to put that on my altar, actually. So we're going to put that off to the side. Panoma. Yamaya. Shell, which I love that there's the inclusion, again, of other culturally specific goddesses. And Amaterasu. There's Oya. Artemis. Bridget. Aphrodite. I think I'm going to put that one on my other altar. Sekhmet. Bast. Helen of Troy. Kuan Yin, and I think this is such a beautiful depiction of Kuan Yin. I used to actually have the Wild Kuan Yin Oracle from Alana Fairchild, but it was one of those decks that had like the meaning on the back, and so I would just kind of hand them out to people during their readings. So, all right. So you guys can kind of see similar artwork, but it's not overly dark. There's almost like a pastel kind of feeling to it. And I love how powerful the ladies look in this deck. So that is one of the reasons why I initially purchased it. And I did used to use both of these decks in conjunction quite a bit in my own personal practices. Now, one of the, I guess, older decks that I've had for some time that I don't know if I'll ever get rid of is going to be the Connected and Free deck from, I forgot her name, and I don't have, from Inner Hue, but I forgot her actual name. So again, this is another deck that I purchased from the person directly. And even though this deck is quite old and I've had it for quite a few years, it is in really good shape. And I feel like there's a sentimental attachment to this deck. Now, this deck does have like chakra cards, as you can see here, which I thought were great. We have the crown chakra. So this is going to be all the chakra cards. So if you work with the chakras, it's nice to have a deck with the symbols or that connection for you. Now, I got this deck. I think this one's from 2014. And I just thought it was so beautiful. I was like, I remember whenever I saw it online and I was like, oh, I need to get that. And it was like, the shipping was from Australia. Like, it was crazy. It was very expensive for me, especially when you're used to buying like mass produced decks for, you know, at the time it'd be like, you know, $15, $20 max. Now decks are much more expensive. So this one was like $40, and then plus the shipping and everything, it ended up being like $60. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. But it is a deck that I would use so much and enjoyed so much. And I still to this day absolutely love this artwork. I know that she redid it a few years ago. I'm not sure what happened. So if Inner Hue sees this and is like, oh, I really wish you wouldn't have used my old version of the deck, which is one of the reasons why I haven't used it publicly. I kind of use it for my own personal practice in a while, because I'm not sure which of the cards was changed out and I didn't want to inquire, or, you know, whatever. An artist has every right to say, hey, that's not a part of who I am anymore. I don't want it out there. And I think this is one of the coolest fear cards I've ever seen. Second to the fear card from the Queen of the Moon Oracle by Stacey DeMarco. But I love this for just the representation of it. And it does kind of give you the sense of like, that is kind of how fear can feel at times, right? Now I'm like, I gotta start using this deck more often. And it's just so beautiful. There's just this beautiful kind of ethereal, like watercolory, very beautiful kind of energy to it. And I love how a lot of strength cards have like a lion in them. I love how collectively we're like, lions are strength. It's like this card that I always thought was cool. And while some of these cards may not evoke the sense of like, oh, I know exactly what that means or what the intention of that card may mean, I just always enjoyed the artwork from it. And so she did create the Lumina Tarot as well, which I did have for many years. I ended up deciding to pass it along because I was not using it. And while I do have a deck collection, I don't consider myself a collector in the sense of I don't just keep decks just to keep them. Except for a few like this where I'm just like, there's a sentimental attachment to it. And I do tend to try to like put them back in my rotation for my personal practices. And I love this higher knowledge card. So it's just a beautiful deck in the sense of it has this beautiful energy to it. It has a little bit of everything that you would need if you're looking for an oracle deck. I like the deck card size. It's still a really good quality for how old this is and how much I used to use it. I do try to be very careful with my decks as well, not overly shuffling them or bending them and trying to crack them. So, and I love this endings card. And I'm thinking this is a card that she replaced, so I'm not going to leave it on top. So yeah, this is the Connected and Free Oracle, the Alchemist Oracle. I don't know if she named it that whole thing. But yeah, I just have always loved this deck. And it is one that for years and years and years I reached out to and used in my practice. Now, another deck that is one of these like indie print. This is from 2018 from Evelyn Terranova. I don't even know how I found this deck. I think it was like in a deck group. And I just was like, what is this? This is so beautiful. And I'm going to show you guys the artwork. But it is a little bit interesting. And I never really dove into it too much. So it's one of these things where I'm like, I hope I have the time to really like dive into it, because it kind of crosses over two of my loves, cards, using cards, and then also astrology and moon cycles and things like that. So I just think it's great to have something like this, because it does talk about like the moon phases, things of that nature. So, and then the artwork is absolutely stunning. And a little side note is my best friend who passed away in 2021 and I were trying to come up with a deck a few years ago before she passed. And one of the names that I had wanted to call it was the Inner Compass Oracle. And this was before this, I even found this in 2018. So we were workshopping some names, but I was like, oh, it's like, I would love to call it like the Inner Compass, because it's like you find yourself, or whatever. So, the reason why I feel like I don't really reach for this deck as often is, one, my inexperience and lack of understanding as to how to utilize this deck the best way. But the reason why I've also kept it is because the artwork is stunning. It's just absolutely beautiful. They almost look like photographs, but I promise you they're just like, it's art. It's things that somebody drew. And I just think that's fantastic. So I haven't really been able to let myself let this deck go, I guess, if you want to call it that. Just because I love art, and this is obviously something that somebody put together with a lot of labor, a lot of love, and I just keep it because it's just so freaking stunning that I can't in my mind think of a reason other than, okay, even if I don't use it, it's still such a beautiful piece of artwork. So it's worth me keeping with the decks that I do have, and just kind of contemplating over the images, even if I don't always understand the messages that are attached to them, that Evelyn Terranova put together. To me, I think that this still is a beautiful deck to kind of use as like an oracle in the sense, or maybe even just as like a symbolism sort of deck. So that's kind of what I tend to use it more as, a symbolic kind of review of certain things, whether it's the animals in there, whether it's the season, whatever. That's kind of how I like to read a lot of decks, is kind of just tune into whatever is coming through at that time for that message. But isn't that, they're just so beautiful, just beautiful little pieces, beautiful little things that just kind of stand out. That is just so impressive that somebody has so much talent that they could do things like this, because I'm envious. I can't draw that well. But have you ever even heard of this deck? I don't really see it out and about. I really have never seen it. Like someone posting about it or anything like that. So I don't know if this was a very limited run and that she only posted it in a couple of groups. So, and then there you go. It's 100 of 350. That's probably why I don't really see it too often. So yeah, this is one of those beautiful decks that I just love and I've owned for many years, but I don't really use often in my practice. And then finally, I'm going to talk about this little guy. I don't know if there's a card stuck down there. I can't tell. So this is the Empyrean Oracle, and I think I got stuff on the box. From Threads of Fate, which I do love their tarot decks. And this is a 44 card with this really cool, I guess it's called lenticular print with holographic backing. It's a very interesting, like as you can see, it's like the images kind of flash. I'm trying to capture it. I don't know how much this will capture, but I just think it's really interesting. but I haven't really allowed myself to kind of study it enough to kind of really connect to how to utilize this deck. Also, it's chunky cardstock, and it has this really cool, the backing. It's just really interesting, and I love that the cards kind of like move and flash. Not the best for me to do videos on, so I haven't really put it, whatever. And even in person, it's kind of hard because people are like, what is that? But it was just, this is the death card, I believe, yeah. So I'm hoping that the camera is capturing the shift. There's light. So all of the cards have this shift in them with a message or the card actual like name. But I haven't really found a way for me to actively use this, but I just think it's such a beautiful piece of artwork that I can't bring myself to say, hey, like maybe I'm not even seeing the shift on this one. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see it. There's balance. I just think it's cool. I mean, I've never seen a deck that does that, so it's very interesting that it has that ability. It has a very, very interesting thing with it. And it is a very unique quality that I think gives it something very special. And I just feel like it's not time for me to kind of release it and let it kind of go off to live somewhere else with somebody else yet. I'm hoping that in time I will figure out how to use this. I think that this would be great for maybe like some spiritual connection, maybe even working with like higher angels, things like that, if that is something that you're into. I just think it's very, very, it's very flashy. It's very cool. It's a very modern looking deck, and that, you know, when have we seen a deck that can kind of like almost flash a message to you? I'm hoping this is like coming up well on the camera. I'm not gonna like keep turning every single one around, but it's just really crazy looking. I remember when I saw it, I was like, that is so unique. And I was like, I need to get my hands on that and see how this works, because it is really crazy looking. And I don't know, there's something about the energy of this deck that feels very like strong, a very strong pull, I guess would be the nicest way. There's a grip to it. Girl, and then there you go. And then the guidebook kind of has, you know, the information as far as like what the cards mean, how it works, their interpretations. I think it's cool because there's like songs that they've added. So if you're into using music and things like that, I think it's great because a lot of their decks have that inclusion, which I think is great for those of us that love music. You can kind of connect, oh, my book is falling apart a little bit. It's okay. So yeah, and you can kind of see the card meanings a little bit better and what's included here. So it's a beautiful deck. I think it's great in the sense of it's just so unique. And I haven't really seen another deck that has this kind of artwork to it, or that has the same kind of qualities with the holographic and kind of that weird like shift that it can do with the card meanings or the card fronts. So those are just a few of the decks that I think are great and have beautiful artwork and why I've kept them. So let me know if there's other decks in your collection that maybe you're keeping that you've hung on to because of the artwork or because of almost like a sentimental kind of connection to the deck. And if you've ever seen any of these decks and what you think about these decks that I mentioned today. So have a good one. Take care. Stay safe. And as always, make good choices. Bye.